It was the kind of morning that made everyone smile. The sun was bright but not too harsh, and the school compound buzzed with the usual chatter and laughter of students eager to start the day. St. Mary's High School was like any other, a place of learning, friendships, and, sometimes, secrets. In the center of it all was Anita. Anita was perfect. At least, that's what everyone thought. With her flawless grades, soft-spoken nature, and kind eyes, she was the student every teacher adored. Her fellow students called her an angel. She never raised her voice, never got into trouble, and always helped others. She was the definition of perfection. But there was something strange about Anita, something hidden behind her calm and gentle face. Few people noticed, and those who did were quick to dismiss their feelings. How could such a kind, sweet girl be anything but good? Yet, strange things had started happening at St. Mary's. Small, odd events that people couldn't explain. First, it was the sudden illnesses. Students would feel fine one minute and collapse the next, only to recover with no clear diagnosis. Then came the accidents, tripping on perfectly flat ground, bookshelves falling with no one touching them, classrooms catching fire mysteriously. And every time something bad happened, Anita was always nearby, her innocent smile in place, offering to help. The day it all began to unravel was a Friday. The school was preparing for its annual talent show, and the air was filled with excitement. Anita, of course, was the head of the organizing committee. She had volunteered, as usual, and no one thought twice about it. Why would they? Anita was the perfect person for the job. That morning, as students practiced their acts in the assembly hall, a strange feeling hung in the air. It was like the atmosphere was charged with something heavy. "Has anyone seen Jennifer?" one of the students asked, her voice cutting through the noise of rehearsals. Jennifer was Anita's closest friend, or so everyone thought. The two of them were always together, and their friendship seemed unbreakable. But Jennifer hadn't shown up to school in days, and rumors were beginning to spread. Some said she had fallen ill. Others whispered that she'd left town without telling anyone. Anita, standing in the corner with her clipboard, overheard the conversation. She smiled softly and walked over to the group. "Don't worry about Jennifer," she said, her voice gentle as always. "She'll be back soon. She just needs some time." The group nodded, accepting her words without question. After all, Anita always knew best. But later that day, something strange happened. Jennifer's locker, which had remained untouched for days, suddenly opened on its own. Books spilt out onto the floor, along with a folded piece of paper. A group of students gathered around, curious. One of them picked up the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had written it in a hurry. The message was short but chilling. "Stay away from Anita." The students exchanged confused glances, unsure what to make of it. Was it a prank? But who would joke about something like that? That night, as the talent show began, tension was in the air. The lights flickered every now and then, and the speakers buzzed, as if struggling to stay on. The audience didn't notice much, too focused on the performances. But backstage, things were different. A girl from the drama club was preparing for her act when she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. She turned around, expecting to see someone behind her, but the space was empty. Yet, the cold feeling lingered. Moments later, a loud crash echoed from the storage room. A group of students rushed to see what had happened and found the room in disarray. Costumes were scattered, props lay broken, and, in the middle of it all, was Anita, kneeling on the floor, her hands covering her face. I don't know what happened," she stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "I just came to check on the props, and then everything fell." The students helped her up, assuring her it wasn't her fault. But as they turned to leave, one of them noticed something strange. A shadow, long and dark, stretched across the floor. It wasn't coming from Anita or any of the students. It was just there. No one said anything, but the unease grew. By the time the talent show ended, everyone was ready to go home. The odd events of the day were enough to put anyone on edge. As the last few students left the hall, Anita stood alone on the stage, her face calm and her smile serene. But behind her sweet demeanor, something was wrong. Very wrong. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, and then her expression changed. The soft, innocent look disappeared, replaced by her colder self. Her eyes darkened, and a small smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. Perfect, she whispered to herself. As she turned to leave, the stage lights flickered one last time before plunging the room into darkness. And in that moment, the angel that everyone adored revealed a glimpse of the darkness hidden underneath. Monday morning arrived with cold stillness. It was as if the school itself had sensed something was wrong. The bright laughter and chatter of students were muted, replaced by whispers and uneasy glances. The talent show had left a mark on St. Mary's. Rumors flew around like trapped birds, bouncing off walls and echoing in hushed tones. Most of the students couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows, something they couldn't explain. Some spoke about the strange crashes and flickering lights, others about the mysterious note found in Jennifer's locker. And in the middle of all these stories, one name kept surfacing: Anita. As usual, Anita arrived at school looking as angelic as ever. Her smile was soft, her voice kind, and she moved through the hallways with the same grace everyone was used to. But this time, something was different. She walked past a group of girls who had been talking about her. The moment she approached, their voices fell to a whisper. One of them, a girl named Lisa, couldn't stop staring at her, her eyes wide with fear. Anita paused and turned to her, her innocent smile never fading. "Is everything all right, Lisa?" she asked softly. Lisa froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but there was something off about Anita, something that made her blood run cold. "Why, yeah, everything's fine," Lisa stammered, avoiding her gaze. Anita tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, but the smile remained. "Good," she said. "I'd hate for anything bad to happen to you." The words were simple, but there was an underlying threat, a quiet menace that made Lisa shudder. As Anita walked away, Lisa felt her knees weaken. She had never felt so terrified in her life. By lunchtime, things had only gotten worse. Jennifer's absence was still a hot topic, but now there were new rumors. A boy from the basketball team had collapsed during practice, clutching his chest as if someone had squeezed the life out of him. His friends claimed it happened out of nowhere. One minute he was fine, the next he was gasping for air. He had been taken to the hospital, but the doctors were baffled. There was nothing physically wrong with him. "I swear I saw her," one of the boys whispered to his friend at the lunch table. Right before he collapsed. Anita was standing there, watching. The friend shook his head in disbelief. "That doesn't make any sense. Why would she?" "I don't know, man. I just know what I saw." As they spoke, a sudden gust of wind blew through the cafeteria, though all the windows were shut. Trays rattled on tables, and students exchanged uneasy glances. The strange feeling that had been haunting the school since Friday seemed to grow heavier, like an invisible weight pressing down on everyone. Later that afternoon, Lisa decided to skip her last class and go to the library instead. She needed to clear her head, to get away from the whispers and the strange tension that seemed to follow her. The library was quiet, the perfect escape. Or so she thought. As she walked through the empty rows of bookshelves, she felt that same chill she had experienced backstage at the talent show. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, but something about the quiet felt wrong, like she wasn't alone. Suddenly, a soft, almost faint voice whispered her name. "Lisa." She froze, her heart racing. The voice was faint, barely audible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She looked around, her eyes darting from shelf to shelf, but there was no one there. "Lisa." The voice came again, this time closer, as if it was right behind her. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Still, no one. Her eyes scanned the library nervously, and that's when she saw it, something in the corner of her eye. A shadow, long and dark, moved swiftly between the bookshelves, disappearing before she could get a good look. Fear gripped her, and she bolted for the door. As she reached the exit, she heard the soft giggle of a girl, light and mocking. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Anita. The next day, Lisa was a wreck. She hadn't slept all night, and she could barely focus in class. Her mind kept going back to the library, to the voice and the shadow. She had tried to tell her friends, but no one believed her. "It's just your imagination," they said. "You're being paranoid." But Lisa knew what she had heard. And she knew what she had seen. As the week wore on, the strange events continued. More students fell mysteriously ill, random objects went missing, and a deep sense of unease hung over the school. Some students started skipping classes altogether, too scared to be there. By Thursday, the principal called an emergency meeting for all students and staff. He stood at the podium in the assembly hall, his face stern as he addressed the school. "I know many of you have been concerned about the recent incidents," he began. "I want to assure you that we are looking into everything, and we will get to the bottom of this. But for now, I ask that everyone remains calm and focused on their studies." As he spoke, Anita sat quietly in the front row, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face a picture of innocence. But there was a flicker in her eyes, something dark and almost gleeful. The principal continued his speech, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. He had no idea that the girl sitting so calmly in front of him was the very source of the chaos that had taken over the school. And as the assembly ended and the students filed out, one thing was clear: whatever was happening at St. Mary's was far from over. Anita's mask of innocence was beginning to slip, and soon, the real darkness would reveal itself. Friday arrived, but the atmosphere at St. Mary's was anything but normal. The usual excitement that came with the end of the week was missing. Instead, a heavy blanket of fear and uncertainty hung over the school. Students whispered in hallways, avoiding eye contact as if afraid something might happen if they spoke too loudly. Lisa hadn't spoken much since her terrifying encounter in the library. She could feel eyes on her wherever she went, though she never saw who was watching. It wasn't just her mind playing tricks, there was someone following her. And she knew exactly who it was. Anita. But what could she do? No one would believe her. Who would suspect that the girl who helped the teachers after class, who smiled so sweetly at everyone, could be behind all the chaos? She didn't have any proof, just her growing fear and the strange things happening around her. By lunch, Lisa's nerves were on edge. She barely touched her food, her eyes constantly scanning the room. It was as if she were waiting for something to happen. And then it did. Without warning, a loud crash echoed through the cafeteria. Everyone jumped, turning toward the source of the noise. A tray had fallen to the floor, food splattered everywhere. At first, it seemed like an accident, but the tension in the room thickened when the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, the cafeteria doors slammed shut with a deafening bang, as if an invisible force had pushed them. The students gasped in unison, panic rising in their chests. For a moment, the entire room was silent, save for the sound of the flickering lights overhead. And then, it started. One by one, the lights above began to shatter. Glass rained down like sharp, twinkling stars, forcing students to duck under tables. Screams filled the room as chaos erupted. Lisa, crouching under her table, held her breath, her heart pounding wildly. In the midst of the confusion, she caught sight of Anita standing by the door. Unlike everyone else, Anita wasn't hiding or cowering. She stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her face expressionless. Her eyes, however, were different. They were cold, dark, and filled with something sinister. And that's when Lisa knew. This wasn't some random accident. This was her. The lights continued to shatter, and students scrambled for the exits, pushing and shoving in their desperation to get out. But the doors wouldn't budge. It was as if they were locked from the inside, trapping everyone in. Just when it seemed like the chaos would never end, the lights stopped flickering, and the doors suddenly swung open. The students rushed out, breathing heavily, some crying, others in shock. No one could explain what had happened, and the school staff were quick to dismiss it as a power surge, a freak accident. But Lisa knew better. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. That evening, Lisa sat on her bed, clutching her phone tightly. She had to tell someone, anyone, about what she'd seen. But as she typed out a message to her friend, a strange thing happened. The letters on her screen started shifting, rearranging themselves into something else. Her heart stopped as she read the new message. "It's useless, Lisa. No one will believe you." Her hands shook as she tried to delete the message, but it wouldn't go away. Instead, her phone screen flickered, and for a brief moment, she saw Anita's face staring back at her. The same cold, dark eyes, and that terrifying smile. Lisa threw the phone onto her bed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She couldn't stay silent any longer. She needed help. The next day, Lisa made a decision. She was going to confront Anita. It was risky, but she couldn't let this go on. Whatever Anita was doing, it had to stop. She waited until after school, watching Anita from a distance as she walked down the empty hallway. There was something different about her today. Her usual soft smile was gone, replaced by a blank, almost eerie expression. Lisa followed her cautiously, keeping her distance as they moved deeper into the school, past the classrooms and into a part of the building that was rarely used. The air felt colder here, the shadows longer, and Lisa's fear grew with every step. Finally, they reached an old storage room at the far end of the hallway. Anita stopped at the door, her hand resting on the handle for a moment before she turned and looked directly at Lisa. It was as if she had known Lisa was following her all along. "Are you going to keep hiding, Lisa?" Anita's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, something dark and unsettling. Lisa stepped out from behind the corner, her heart racing. "What are you doing, Anita?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" Anita tilted her head slightly, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Doing what?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "The accidents, the notes, everything." Lisa's voice grew louder, desperation creeping in. "You're behind all of it, aren't you?" Anita's smile returned, but it wasn't the sweet, angelic smile that everyone at school was used to. This one was twisted, dark. "And what if I am?" she whispered, stepping closer. "What are you going to do about it, Lisa?" Lisa took a step back, fear tightening her chest. "You can't keep doing this," she stammered. "People are getting hurt. Jennifer, the boy from the basketball team." Anita's eyes darkened. "Jennifer," she repeated, her voice low. Jennifer got what she deserved. She was getting too close. She started asking too many questions. Lisa's blood ran cold. So Jennifer hadn't just disappeared. Something had happened to her, and Anita knew exactly what. "What did you do to her?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. Anita's smile faded. "You really want to know?" she asked, her voice soft but menacing. "You really want to see what happens to people who don't mind their own business?" Before Lisa could respond, the door to the storage room creaked open behind Anita, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Anita stepped aside, gesturing toward the room with a tilt of her head. "Go ahead," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "Why don't you see for yourself?" Lisa's heart pounded in her ears. She wanted to run, to get as far away from Anita as possible. But something held her in place, fear, curiosity, maybe both. She took a shaky step toward the open door, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. As she peered into the darkness, a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. There was something inside that room, something waiting for her. She could feel it. And then, from the shadows, she heard it, a faint, familiar voice. "Lisa, help me." It was Jennifer. Lisa froze, her heart pounding against her chest. The voice, that desperate, pleading voice, had come from inside the pitch-black storage room. It was unmistakably Jennifer's. But how? She had been missing for weeks, and the teachers had said she moved away. The sound of her voice now, barely more than a whisper, sent chills through Lisa's entire body. She glanced at Anita, who stood by the door with that same cold, twisted smile. The dark-haired girl's eyes seemed to glimmer with amusement, as if she were watching a game unfold. "Go on, Lisa," Anita taunted. "Don't you want to help her?" The air around them felt thick, oppressive. Lisa's body screamed at her to run, to get out of that hallway and as far away from Anita as possible. But she couldn't leave, not with Jennifer's voice still echoing in her ears. With shaky hands, she took another step toward the open door. She peered into the darkness, squinting to make out any shape, any movement inside. Her stomach churned as the heavy silence pressed down on her. Then, a faint shuffle of footsteps came from within, followed by a ragged, shallow breath. "Lisa, please, don't leave me." Jennifer's voice was weak, trembling with fear. "I'm coming," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a deep breath and stepped over the threshold into the room, the darkness swallowing her whole. The air inside was damp, cold, and it smelled faintly of mildew. Lisa's hands reached out, brushing against rough walls as she cautiously moved forward. The dim light from the hallway barely penetrated the room, casting eerie, shifting shadows. As her eyes adjusted, she saw a figure huddled in the far corner. Jennifer. She was sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, her clothes dirty and torn, her hair a matted mess. Lisa gasped in shock. Jennifer looked nothing like the confident, outgoing girl she had once known. Now, she seemed broken, fragile like a ghost of her former self. "Jennifer." Lisa knelt beside her, her voice thick with emotion. "What happened to you?" Jennifer's eyes slowly lifted to meet Lisa's. They were filled with fear, pain, and something else, something deeper, more unsettling. She took everything," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. "I couldn't escape, she wouldn't let me." Lisa's heart clenched. "Who?" "Anita." Jennifer nodded weakly. "She's not who you think she is. She's not even human." Her voice cracked with terror. "You have to leave, Lisa. Before it's too late." Before Lisa could respond, a soft, mocking voice came from behind them. "Too late for what?" Lisa whipped around to see Anita standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her smile wider than ever. But there was something different about her now. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and her skin seemed paler, almost translucent in the dim light. "She warned you, didn't she?" Anita said, stepping into the room with an eerie grace. Jennifer was always such a smart girl. Too bad she couldn't keep her curiosity in check. Lisa stood up, positioning herself between Jennifer and Anita. Her heart was racing, but she refused to back down. "What are you, Anita? What do you want?" Anita's smile widened even more, stretching unnaturally across her face. "What am I?" she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "You're asking the wrong question, Lisa. It's not about what I am, it's about what you're going to become." A cold chill ran down Lisa's spine. Before she could react, the door behind Anita slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping them inside the room. The darkness seemed to grow thicker, swallowing the light entirely, and the air around them grew colder still. "You see," Anita continued, her voice smooth and menacing, "I've been watching you, Lisa. You've always been so clever. So curious. But curiosity can be dangerous, can't it?" Lisa's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Jennifer was still huddled behind her, too weak to move, and Anita was blocking their only way out. "I'm not like the others," Anita said, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "I don't belong here. This place, this school, it's just a playground for me. A place to have fun. But you, Lisa, you're different. You've been interesting. And I don't want to lose that." Lisa swallowed hard, trying to hide the fear in her voice. "What do you mean?" Anita stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Lisa's. "I mean, I'm going to let you live, Lisa. You're going to walk out of here, and no one will ever know what happened to Jennifer, or to any of the others. But in return, you'll be mine. Forever." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, yours? What are you going to do to me?" Anita chuckled softly, the sound sending shivers down Lisa's spine. "Nothing you won't enjoy. You'll see things differently soon enough. The world will look clearer, brighter. And all you have to do is stop fighting." Lisa's mind screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something, anything, but her body felt frozen. Anita's presence was overwhelming, suffocating, as if the darkness itself was alive, pressing down on her from all sides. And then, a voice cut through the air, weak but determined. "No." Jennifer had stood up, her body shaking but her eyes filled with defiance. "You won't take her, Anita. Not like you took me." Anita's smile faltered for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, Jennifer. Still trying to play the hero, are you? Haven't you learned by now that resistance is pointless? But Jennifer didn't back down. You won't win. Not this time. Before Lisa could fully understand what was happening, Jennifer lunged at Anita, pushing her back toward the door. Anita let out a furious, inhuman scream as Jennifer struggled to keep her pinned. Go, Lisa, Jennifer shouted, her voice filled with desperation. Run. Lisa didn't need to be told twice. She darted toward the door, her hand fumbling for the handle as she heard Anita's enraged shrieks behind her. The door swung open, and she bolted into the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She ran. Down the hall, past the classrooms, through the school doors, and into the fading daylight outside. She didn't stop until she was far from the school, her legs burning, her breath ragged. When she finally stopped, she turned back to look at the building, now dark and silent. Jennifer was still in there. And so was Anita. But she couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. Lisa would never forget the events of that day, but the school would eventually move on, just as it always did. The accidents would be explained away, and Jennifer's disappearance would be written off as another transfer. But Lisa knew the truth. Anita was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her next victim. And Lisa. She would never be the same. The darkness had followed her home.